let's go with the fourth question, which is, it has to do with pair merge. So pair merge is taken to be more complex than simplest merge. Thus, it seems to be an apparent departure from the strong minimalist thesis. What properties do the phenomena that pair merge has been said to be related to or to capture? I can think of adjuncts, some aspects of morphology according to different authors. And also, it seems to me in your recent talks that you have been assuming that it may also be used to handle unstructured coordination. Why? So if that's the operation that we are going to use to handle those phenomena, what do they have in common?
Well, let's start with unstructured coordination. That's been a problem for 60 years. There simply are structures in language. It's just a fact, like John, Bill, Mary, the guy I met yesterday, Tom Smith, ran, danced, sang, so on and so forth. I mean, that's language. These sequences like John, Bill, Mary, the guy I met yesterday, they don't have any internal structure. But they're unbounded. They're unbounded and they're unstructured. Now, that was a problem 60 years ago because you can't generate them by any form of phrase structure grammar, any rewriting systems, even universal rewriting systems, which are basically universal Turing machines. Can't do it. You need an infinite number of rules. It was thought for a while you could do it with generalized transformations, but that was shown to be wrong by Howard Lasnik. So you couldn't generate them by any means. And that remains true right now. No means that anyone has proposed to give you unstructured, unbounded coordination. So it's a problem. Well, notice that these things have to be sequences, not sets. The order matters. So if you say John and Mary ran and danced respectively, the order matters. If you say in that order, the order matters. And there are other such devices. So these things are unstructured sequences, which means that we need an operation in language which says form a sequence. Take a set of objects, form a sequence out of them. Okay, that's an irreducible fact about language. Well, if you have sequences, then the smallest sequence is of course 2 elements, but that's a pair. So you automatically have pairs. And if the pairs are used for merge, you have pair merge. So it's there. Question, is it used for anything? Well, that's an interesting question. I think that's on the drawing boards. There are things that look like pair merge ought to be appropriate. Actually, one of them is adjunction. So if you have a phrase, young man, it's understood to have the properties of man, not of young. Okay, that's just a fact. That suggests strongly that young is adjoined to man, and that the operations of composition aren't looking at the thing that's joined. It's kind of like a separate dimension. Now, there's no reason to think that the brain has 2 dimensions just because paper does. When we write these things out, it's 2-dimensional, but doesn't tell us anything about the brain. It may have multiple dimensions. So it could be that things are just tacked on in a certain place. That could enter into interpretation. Like when all this is interpreted semantically, the adjuncts are interpreted as properties of the thing they're joined to rather than conversely. So that looks like a domain in which an asymmetrical relation might be appropriate. In morphology, well, if you look at the internal to the structure of lexical items, there's a lot of computation going on. And some of these also seem to be asymmetrical. So they may involve something like pair merge. But I think that's just an open area of research. Weirdly, this operation is there basically because it's the minimal case of sequences, and we can't avoid sequences. So the question is it used anywhere? I think that's pretty much an open question.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there are many questions that come to my mind from this response, but we can maybe over the email discuss details because there are many things there. Okay, let's go with the next one, which has to do with agree. So, what's the status of agree? I mean, the question has to do with the recent discussion on merge. So, can agree be reduced to merge by means of feature chains, which is an idea that was adopted in the 90s in the same sense that other phenomena like control in your recent talks have been reduced to this basic operation?
Well, agree is a very funny relation. We should ask ourselves a fundamental question about it. Why does it exist? I mean, what does it do? Why should there be unvalued features, which is the basis for agree? Why should there be structural case? They don't have any semantic interpretation. If you drop them from the language, the thought would be the same. Okay. In fact, if you look more closely, there are some cases where there are things you just can't say because of agree. There are thoughts you have, but you can't say because agree doesn't work. So take simple disjunction. John or Bill is here. Okay, either John or Bill is here. How about the men or Bill is here? Can't say that. The men or Bill are here. Can't say that. If you just had the copula be without any features, you could say John, the men or Bill be here, as in some dialects, in fact. But in the dialect we're now using, you just can't say it, only because agree is there making a problem. So it doesn't seem to have any semantic interpretation. It makes certain things inexpressible. And what's it there for? That's really an unanswered question. Now, there was a proposal around a couple of years ago, mine in fact, that unvalued features had the function of identifying phases. They are very closely related to phases, but that led to too many complications. It required a notion of inheritance, deriving the features of inflection from C, which is the phase boundary, which leads to all kind of complications. So that doesn't look right. In fact, I think we don't have an answer to the question why agree unvalued features, structural case. Why do they even exist in language? They're all over the place, even when you don't hear them, like in an analytic language like English, you don't hear them most of the time, but there's good reasons, Vergniaud's reasons from many years ago, why we think they're actually there. So that's an open question, something for you to solve. Why do these properties even exist? Okay. We're not going to have an answer to the question whether it works by features unless we figure out why it's there altogether. I think there's a deeper question. So we can get technical answers. We can say, okay, let's say agree involves features, they delete, and so on and so forth. That'll give us a description of what's going on. And you can give a lot of different descriptions, but my own feeling is that they're all missing something until we get an understanding of why language has these properties ubiquitously. There's some cases where there's good answers, like in polysynthetic languages, the kind that Mark Baker studied, others, then languages where the words seem to be almost freely ordered, but the core structure is highly structured. And you have to have ways of identifying things in the core structure with the words that are phrases that are floating around. Well, you need features to connect them. Okay, so you can see it there. But why, say, in the Indo-European languages, why there do you have properties like unvalued features? I really don't think there's an answer to that. No satisfying answer, at least. So I don't, although as to what's the status of agree, I think it's kind of on hold till we have a better understanding of why these systems are there altogether. Now, of course, that's very commonly true in the sciences. There are things you don't understand, but you have to keep on working, okay? So you just pick some solution, you work with that, try to make it work as well as possible. But in the back of your mind, you know there's a problem. I mean, that's even true of physics. Like physics has a pretty large problem. It can't find 95% of what constitutes the universe. Sounds like a pretty serious problem. If physics were linguistics, people would say, throw it out. It's junk. We don't want this nonsense. But physics is part of the sciences, not part of the soft sciences. So therefore, it's understood that you work with what you understand, and you know there are big problems in the background. Keep them in mind. Maybe someday you'll be able to solve them. Meanwhile, do the best you can. That attitude someday maybe will permeate the soft sciences. We'll throw out a lot of nonsense that we hear in philosophical other literature. So yes, this is a case in point. There's an interesting question. There was a similar question for decades as to why you have displacement. It was the main question that was asked, why this crazy property of displacement. Displacement and reconstruction, notice. Displacement and reconstruction are one operation, why bother with them? Now we have a good answer to that. It's the simplest possible operation. Well, maybe someday we'll get an answer to unstructured, unvalued features, but right now we don't have it. So I think it's in limbo.
The more I ask, the more questions I have. So I think this is also a good point to tell to the students that are attending. I mean, the young people here that again, this is what we are in the field for. I mean, just to try to come up with interesting questions about things that we thought that we understand, but maybe we don't. So I think this is what, I mean, these are the kind of conclusions that one can gather from Noam's comments. So I encourage you to maybe to contact him at some point or try to provide answers to these matters that are very simple on the surface, but are very complex and very deep at the end of the day.